I'm Monica Batiste. I'm an artist, an author and a yoga teacher.
Hi, I'm Richard Lancaster. I'm very privileged to be in the home of Monica Batiste, a rather splendid artist who is wanting to paint a portrait of me, and I suggested to Monica that incorporated into my portrait, perhaps we should look at incorporating Sir Joe Bjelke-Petersen.
Originally with Richard, it was his enigmatic personality and the way he lights up and the way he talks and his stories and the way he's so passionate about arts and artists and film, and that really captivated me, and I thought he'd be a really good subject to paint. Always interesting and surprising, because I didn't know that he had a connection to Joe Bjelke-Petersen. All I knew of him was how I've known him in the last decade through the arts. He's always at art exhibitions, or he's doing a book launch, or he's attending a book launch, always supporting the artists.
I got to know the old man pretty well, and of course he was an old man by that stage, but I'll take you back 30 years to when it all really happened. And that was, I had a company called Frontline Celebrities, and I managed most of Queensland's high-profile celebrities, everybody from television presenters, Billy J. Smiths of the world and all those sort of characters, and Dick Johnsons and various other people, all the top sportsmen and women. And one day I received a phone call from a gentleman, Peter MacDonald, who was the Premier's principal private secretary, and he said, Richard, Sir Joe would like to meet you.
Well, I've always been an artist, all of the arts. I love drawing and painting and dancing and music, but drawing is something I've always loved. When I was 4 and I first started sketching, I remember feeling so excited that I could create something, and I just never stopped. I drew and I drew and I drew and I drew, and then when I was a teenager and went to art college for the first time, because I've been to several, because it's heaps of fun, I learned about oil paints and gouache and started doing more illustrations and oil painting.
I went up to the executive building, which of course has now been demolished, and we sat and talked, and during the conversation, Joe indicated to me that he would like me to help him transition from politics into private life.
I like finding the character of a person inside paint, and it feels a lot to me like when I do a painting that that person is there, that it's like the essence of that person is actually there.
He was very much a polarized character. You either hated him or loved him, and there were no in-betweens. Anyway, I said to him at the time, giving him advice again, I felt that what we needed to do was to try and balance up the negative information that was being promoted through the media. And he agreed. So I sat down and developed a concept of a series of 6 television interviews, half-hour interviews, which we did ultimately in the early part of, I think it was 1988, and it went very well. And of course we did those. The 7th tape, which was the last tape we did, I did subsequent to the Fitzgerald inquiry finishing. And that was a different style of interview. The first 6 interviews were very laid back. We were both in very relaxed situations. The 7th interview was very, very different. We sat in hard back chairs. The atmosphere was dark, and I asked him a lot of very penetrating questions.
Because I know about the controversy. I grew up in New South Wales, so I didn't know Joe as well as people that grew up here. But when I'm painting someone, I feel as though I connect to their spirit. So when I was painting Joe, I got reflections and insights that just came to me while I was painting him, which is why I became more aware of the conflict. And I have a feeling that Joe felt like he was misunderstood.
So that was the 7 tapes, Joe tapes, and we sold a few hundred to people who were his supporters. And then I got bored with the whole thing. Joe moved on, I moved on, I closed Frontline Celebrities, and I decided to retire, which I did. And I moved to Redcliffe and settled down in Scarborough, and that was the start of my retirement.
Originally I wanted to paint Richard for the Archibald, but because my health wasn't excellent, I ran out of time to enter that one, and so I thought I'll just keep painting. And then the Brisbane Portrait Prize came up, and I thought, well, that's actually more perfect because I'm a Queenslander, Richard's a Queenslander, we have a strong connection to Brisbane and to Queensland and the arts here, and so I think it's actually better.
I had a phone call from Matt Condon, who is, as many people would know, one of Queensland's and Australia's prime writers, journalists and writers, and he said, I understand that you did a series of Joe tapes. Now we're talking 30 years hence. And I said, I did. And he said, what have you done with them? And I said, well, nothing. I said, I have them. And I said, I thought maybe what I should be doing is probably donating them to the State Library of Queensland so that from a historical point of view, they're there and people can view them whenever they like. And he said, wow. He said, can you send me a copy? And I sent him a copy, and he was absolutely over the moon. He was both surprised and amazed. And he then organised a time when we did a series of interviews with him. And of course, this is the result of the interviews. Front page, Courier Mail, and in fact, it made the front page of every single Murdoch newspaper in the whole of Australia, which was absolutely amazing to me. I thought, you know, the Joe tapes are finished with and done with and all the rest of it, and suddenly it had lifted again. And this was done in early part of 2018.
My greatest hopes first is to be accepted into the finals. That will be super exciting. And
Well, I'll do that.
will you?
Yeah.
I thought I'll take all my friends. We'll go and check out my painting as many times as I can go. And of course it would be fantastic to win. That would be wonderful for Richard and for me because I think he deserves a win. The future for this painting now is, once I've completed it, I will enter it into some other exhibitions and it may or may not get accepted. Each painting has about an 18-month shelf for most exhibitions because they like to encourage us to keep working, which is good, but it's also not good because then I've got some older paintings that I'd really like to exhibit. So that will be the future, and when that's all done, I will find a place for it to hang that honours Richard.